Next, let's queer up social justice. The hidden LGBTQ plus struggle of 9/11 as partners fought for benefits. In the aftermath of September 11 attacks, while the world grappled with the immediate chaos, a less visible battle emerged: the fight for victim compensation and the inclusion of same-sex partners. Shortly after the tragedy, the U.S. government established the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund, VCF, to offer financial relief to those impacted by the attacks. However, this initiative quickly revealed deeper societal fault lines. Recently, a Cambridge University press article has brought to light the contentious debates surrounding the VCF's distribution and its impact on LGBTQ+ rights. The VCF aimed to compensate families without resorting to litigation against airlines, but triggered significant controversy, especially concerning same-sex partnerships. Initial public and governmental responses were fraught with tension over whether same-sex partners should receive benefits comparable to heterosexual spouses. This debate reflected a broader societal shift, where the visibility of gay heroes like Bingham and Father Mychal Judge challenged traditional views and fueled legislative changes. Public sentiment fluctuated between support for gay rights and resentment towards perceived economic inequality. The VCF highlighted discrepancies in compensation, with wealthy victims' families receiving backlash over government payouts. This in turn intensified discussions about economic disparities, the notion of fairness in compensation. The struggle for inclusion culminated in the passage of the Mychal Judge Act, which provided federal benefits to same-sex partners of first responders, marking a significant, albeit indirect, victory for queer rights in the wake of September 11th. This unfortunate incident happened 23 years ago today. Wow. First of all, I can't believe it's been 23 years, kids.
Yeah,
like
crazy.
23 years. Like, part of me still feels like it was yesterday, right? It's been so long. I remember, everybody remembers where they were at,
I was watching the Today Show.
I was working on Y100 here locally, and I had to tell our listeners what was going on. And we initially thought that it was a drunken pilot, that had crashed into the World Trade Center. And, during that time and before, we've had such an influx of people from New York move down here to Miami and South Florida. So there were so many people trying to just get answers and couldn't even get, the answers. It was a very, very tough time, and I love how some people post, we should remember on 9/11 how people were on September 12th to each other, right?
Exactly.
Because that's such a sentiment that is so, especially through all the times that we're going through now. Now, this story talks about, it made me uneasy just reading the story about how secondary our partnerships are considered, right? You know what I mean? Where it had to be something that had to be drawn out and fought for. I remember when the executive order was signed by Governor Pataki extending these benefits to partners under the state crime victims board. But a lot of people just thought that the 9/11 compensation fund was sincerely anti-gay. Because what people had to, the obstacles that partners had to jump through and get through, some partnerships, some people that had lost their people didn't get anything, or had to wait 10, 15 years to get a dime or any kind of help. I can't even imagine losing my wife.
Right.
And I can't even imagine having to go through that without any support from the government, or watching TV and thinking that my marriage or my partnership with somebody is secondary to a heterosexual couple.
Well, and then especially knowing that wealthy straight families were getting funding.
Exactly.
Right? And you're sitting there going, well, wait, what about me?
And, things like this were a really strong argument for same-sex marriage. And 23 years ago, we didn't have that.
Yeah.
That's right.
And if we did have it, this would have been less of an issue.
Yeah.
But it's just another example of how even if we're married, people still consider our marriages and our partnerships to be somehow not as important, or not as family, not family.
Yeah. Yeah. We lost a lot of LGBTQ plus people that day,
did.
right? And there are people like, we talked about Mychal Judge. We talked about the chaplain, he presided over gay men's funerals during the AIDS crisis when nobody would. Okay. That's the kind of stuff that he did, and he was, I believe, the first person that was killed in the first tower. And Bingham was the other gentleman, correct? Right. And
he was on the plane that was headed in Pennsylvania, and he was on the plane that was headed for the Pentagon. And he and another passenger said, no, we're not, because they knew what was happening because the other planes had already hit the World Trade Center. So he said, he was on the phone with his mom and he said, I gotta go, I love you. And
Wow.
he and a couple other people on that plane are the reason that plane never hit the Pentagon.
Or the White House or anywhere else.
Or
it was,
Congress.
or wherever that it was going to. And that's
Right.
when the last words were like, let's roll or something like that, right? That was them,
yeah,
right?
that was it.
him.
They're doing it.
You know, but there was so many other people, you know, that we also lost. What were you thinking, Paul?
I was just thinking, I'm from New York, and that day will like forever be just, it's still like, did that really happen? And even to this day, you said 23 years ago, but even when I go back to the city today, because the World Trade Center was my marker.
Yes.
Like, if I didn't know where I was in the city, I would look up, and when I saw it, I knew that was south, because New York is a grid, and then I knew my north, south, east, west. And to this day, I will still look. And they put up the Freedom Tower, and that's super nice, but it's not the World Trade. You know what I mean? It's, there's still like a hole up there that for me, there'll just always be this hole in the sky now. From that day. How people have recovered and moved forward has been inspirational. But we're talking about a story today that we're still fighting for these benefits to this day.
Yes, people have died, people have been born. So many things have happened in those 23 years, and some of these families are still fighting for it.
Well,
you know?
something happens in your life, and you go, "Hey, I need help," and they go, "Oh, you don't count." Sorry, you don't.
No,
everybody else gets the help, but you don't.
But
But you don't count. Like your relationship, your love, your amount of love, that doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
And that's so unacceptable. It's 2024.
Yeah.
It's crazy how like during that time, I hear a lot of rhetoric about like, oh, during that time we weren't black, white, whatever. We were all just Americans, and yet people were still being discriminated against during that time.
Exactly.
Of course.
So who is that rhetoric actually for?
The white people.
Boom. So I was, I think, 8 years old at the time. I was sitting in a classroom, no idea what was going on. Just saw a calamity happening, got picked up from school. But just to understand how like being married now, if any sort of tragedy like this were to happen, and to be told, you had a marriage, you had a wedding, it was great, awesome, you have the ring and everything, but you still don't count as like a valid married couple, so you're not going to get the same rights as a straight couple next to you. That is absolutely heartbreaking. On one of the most tragic incidences of the world, to be told this craziness happened and you're traumatized, but we're going to continue to traumatize you by segregating you because of who you love. That is absolutely insane.
Disgusting. It's horrible. And because of, you know, and before we finish this segment, I just want to give you a couple of names of some LGBTQ plus people that we lost 23 years ago. Pamela Boyce, she was the VP of World Trade Center firm, and she was a competitive disco dancer. Jessica DuLong was a writer from Brooklyn. Patrick Burke was a high school principal 1 block away. He got all his students out and then decided to go help and lost his life. Right? Graham Berkeley, he was a concert violinist, right? The Brandhurst and Gamboa family, the 2 dads and their daughter, were coming back from a trip at P-Town. And those are just some of the LGBTQ plus folks that we lost. There are many, 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 many more that their names will never be said. They will never be said again, you know? But if you're ever in New York, you go over to that memorial, right? And you say your little prayer, but you also take a second prayer and you go, LGBTQ plus people that were lost this day, I think of you and everybody who was affected.